You are watching Shadowen, where the stories are real, and the fear is too. I'm starting tonight with one that honestly just left me completely blank, because the sheer level of detail, the mundane reality that gets ripped out from underneath you, it's unsettling. I don't even know how to properly introduce the K-Mart Bathroom Wall, submitted by a guy we'll call Jay. Okay, so this happened maybe 4 years ago. I was working a summer job in this town in Ohio that was basically already dead, like the soul had just packed up and left. It was July, maybe 95 degrees, and I was hungover as hell because my meds sometimes hit me weird if I drink too much cheap beer. I needed water and a break from the heat, so I pulled into the K-Mart parking lot. This K-Mart was like the only functioning business left in that specific strip mall, and it looked like 1993 forgot to close the door on its way out. I bought a bottle of generic lemon-lime soda and a single pack of stale peanuts. It cost $4, which felt criminal, but whatever. The main thing was, I needed to pee. Bad. So I went back towards the restrooms, past the sad, half-stocked seasonal aisle. The men's room was exactly what you would expect. Smelled like old cigarettes and bleach. The tile floor was cracked, a sort of sickly beige color, and there was that specific institutional humidity. I go to the middle stall. The lock was busted, so I had to hold the door shut with one foot. And here's the detail, the thing that etched itself into my brain. On the inside of the stall door, someone, a real artistic vandal, I guess, had drawn this insane thing with a thick black Sharpie. It was a skull, but it had these massive, perfectly rendered teeth and 3 huge, staring eyes. And underneath it, someone had written, "Hi, I live here now," in shaky red ballpoint pen. It was messed up, professional-looking graffiti, mixed with trashy tagging. I remember thinking, God, this place is depressing. I actually scratched my left earlobe while staring at it. I had this weird, persistent itch right under my jaw, too, and the fluorescent light was flickering in this way that gave me a massive headache. I finished, washed my hands. The sink water smelled like rust, and went back out into the store to grab a second soda. I walked maybe 50 feet to the checkout, paid, and realized I'd left my car keys hanging on the hook in the stall. Idiot move, I know. I literally turned right around. Maybe 6 or 7 minutes had passed. I went back to the restroom corridor. Same institutional beige walls. Same smell, though maybe slightly sweeter, which was unsettling. I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and everything was wrong. It wasn't like they had renovated it. It was like they had taken the exact floor plan and replaced every component with something similar, but subtly off. The tiles were the same cracked beige, but the cracks were different, angled sharper, fewer of them. The 2 main sinks were no longer stainless steel, they were porcelain, a pale green color that was the shade of dried bile. The mirrors were higher up the wall than they had been before. I stopped dead and just stared. Dude, my brain literally short-circuited. I thought maybe I was just tired and walked into the women's room by accident, but the sign on the door said men. I walked over to the stalls. There were 3, just like before. I checked the middle one, where I'd left my keys. I nudged the door open. And there it was. The 3-eyed skull. The massive teeth. The "Hi, I live here now" text in red pen. But it wasn't the same. The whole stall door was inverted. Before, the hinge was on the left, and the locking mechanism, the busted one, was on the right. Now the hinge was on the right, and the graffiti, The skull? It was drawn precisely where it was before, centered perfectly on the door panel. But the black Sharpie lines looked heavier, almost like they were drawn with tar. The skull was rotated maybe 5 degrees clockwise, and the red pen text was written in a different handwriting, a cramped, almost panicked style, still saying the exact same sentence.
It felt like looking at a photocopy that was printed on a different machine, and the paper had warped. I reached inside. My keys were not there. I started breathing really fast. I checked the hook on the back of the door, where I was sure I'd hung them. Nothing. I checked the stall next to it. Nothing. I backed up out of the stalls, turning slowly. That's when I noticed the lighting. It was still fluorescent, but the hum was gone. The entire room was absolutely silent, save for the sound of my own breathing, which seemed ridiculously loud. It felt like cotton was stuffed in my ears, like I was standing inside a sound-dampening box. And the door to the main store, the big, heavy wooden door, it looked farther away than it should have, like the room had been stretched out, maybe 3 or 4 extra feet. I looked down at the wall right beside the entry door, near the baseboard. Before I went out, I remembered seeing this specific smear of something brown, maybe old dried ketchup, maybe worse, about the size of a golf ball. I was literally focused on it because I was trying not to step in it. Now that stain wasn't there. But there was a small, perfectly square patch of the wall that looked like it had been scraped down to the drywall, and someone had tried to quickly cover it up with off-white paint that didn't match the beige. I started to panic, thinking maybe I was having a psychotic break. Maybe the hangover was actually serious. I slapped my face. Everything felt real. Too real. I turned back to the sinks. They were still that sick, pale green porcelain. I grabbed the cold metal handle of the stall door, the one with the inverted graffiti. And when I touched it, I felt this absolute crushing coldness, even though the room was hot. Then I heard it. A faint, scraping noise, coming from behind the wall of the stall I was currently holding. Not plumbing. It sounded like fingernails dragging down concrete. I didn't try to find my keys again. I didn't yell. I just ran. I ran out of that bathroom, through the too silent corridor, and back into the main store. The noise of the store, the muffled music, the squeak of a shopping cart, the drone of the air conditioning, it hit me like a physical wave. The sounds were normal again. The light was normal. I didn't stop to explain to the cashier that I lost my keys. I ran outside to my car, which, thank God, I had left unlocked because I'm stupid like that. I threw my second soda, which had suddenly become warm in my hand, onto the asphalt, and I peeled out of that lot so fast my tires smoked. I never went back to that town. I had to call my boss, tell him I was sick, and get a friend to drive up the next day to collect my tools and my lost keys, which he found hanging exactly where I remembered putting them, in the original stall, with the original skull drawing, which he said was still extremely messed up, but didn't mention anything about inverted doors or green sinks. I don't know what happened. Maybe I walked into the wrong K-Mart in the wrong reality. But I still feel like I brought something back with me. Now, every time I enter a public building, especially one that's old and run down, I have to check the layout. I have to count the fixtures, look at the door placement. I do it automatically now. If something is slightly off, if the tiles look too blue or the light hums too loud, I can't stay.
Help me.
I physically cannot stand the idea of walking into a room that decided to change the rules just for me for 6 minutes, then put itself mostly back together. I don't know what to say to that. The idea of a place being structurally sound but functionally inverted, it's just genuinely awful. Like the foundation of the world is just arbitrary. All right, moving on. This next story is equally disturbing, but instead of focusing on space, it focuses on time. This is called The 6-Minute Sunset, and it was submitted by a driver named Mark, who had a very long night in Utah. This was last fall. I was driving from Denver to Reno, long haul. I'd done it a million times, but this time I was doing it on maybe 3 hours of sleep, fueled by gas station coffee and existential dread. I had just broken up with my long-term girlfriend, and I was trying to outrun the entire situation. I hit Utah around maybe 4 p.m. I was trying to make up time, so I decided to ignore the big I-80 signs and take a specific stretch of desolate state route that cuts through a huge valley. It saves 40 miles, but it's completely empty. No towns, no services, just highway. I remember I was listening to this annoying song, that one where the guy sounds like he's singing through a broken nose, and I was trying to find a station that played literally anything else, but the static was thick. I also kept thinking I'd forgotten to pack my blue sweater, and the worry kept looping in my head, even though it was completely irrelevant to the current situation. I had this nagging headache right behind my eye too, which meant I was due for my migraine meds. But they were in the trunk. Anyway, I'm cruising along, maybe doing 75, watching the sun start to dip toward the horizon. It was a beautiful sunset. The sky was this massive, pure orange, like a radioactive peach. I checked my GPS. I had about 90 miles until I hit the next proper junction. The time was 5:27 p.m. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee. I put the cup back down. I looked up. The sun was almost gone. It wasn't just low. It was nearly kissing the mountain ridge. And the sky had changed from bright orange to deep, violent purple and black in the space of maybe 10 seconds. I slammed on the brakes. I looked at the rearview mirror, then back at the horizon. I thought, wait, did I just black out? I hadn't felt tired enough to black out. The whole time sequence was broken. The light was changing impossibly fast. I'm talking about maybe 30 seconds between late afternoon light and near total dusk. The colors were too saturated, too heavy. The purple wasn't atmospheric purple. It was the color of a fresh bruise. I fumbled for my phone. No service, which wasn't unusual, but the time display on the phone read 6:45 p.m. I looked at the car clock. It said 5:35 p.m. This is where I started to genuinely panic. I figured the car clock was right, and my phone had glitched, maybe from the heat. But the light level matched 6:45, not 5:35. It was dark. I sped up, trying to get to a place with any sign of civilization. I was sweating. My stomach literally felt like a bag of rocks. And then the light started coming back. Not slowly, not gradually. The darkness didn't recede. It was yanked away. In maybe a minute, the sky went from black and purple back to that insanely bright, pure, radioactive orange. The sun wasn't rising. It was rising from where it had just set.
It was moving back up into the sky. It looked exactly like someone was fast-forwarding a time-lapse movie of a sunset, and then hitting the rewind button when the sky was totally dark. I started screaming in the car, just an absolute animal noise. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles were white. I looked at my speedometer. I was still going 75 miles per hour. My internal time, my memory, felt like it was moving normally, but the world around me was playing on a broken VCR. The light returned fully. It was maybe 5:40 p.m. on the car clock. The sun was sitting maybe a quarter of the way up from the horizon, frozen. I drove for another few minutes, totally rattled, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was some atmospheric effect. Maybe I really did black out and dream the light reversing. Then I noticed the road signs. I passed a small reflective brown sign for Fountain Creek Historical Marker, 1.5 miles. I drove for another 2 minutes. According to my speed, I should have passed that marker. But then I passed the exact same sign. Fountain Creek Historical Marker, 1.5 miles. I looked over my shoulder. There was nothing behind me but the straight, featureless road disappearing into the orange light. I drove faster. I started counting mile markers, but they were appearing too frequently. I'd pass one that said M42, and then 30 seconds later, another one that said M42. The road was looping. I was on a stretch of highway that was folding in on itself, maybe only a couple of miles long, and I was trapped in it. I slowed down to maybe 30 miles per hour, squinting through the windshield. The light was unbearable now, blinding and hot, but without generating heat. It felt like studio lighting. And then I saw the fence. On the left side of the road, where there had only been scrub desert and juniper trees, there was a perfect stretch of old wooden split-rail fence. It looked totally out of place, like someone had put a farming prop in the middle of a barren valley. And standing next to the fence, facing my car, was a person. They were tall and very thin, and they were dressed in clothes that looked completely wrong for 2023. Like a dusty suit, maybe 1920s style, light-colored.
They weren't moving. They were just standing there, absolutely rigid, their head tilted slightly toward the road. They looked like a photograph. I slammed on the horn. Long, sustained blast. The sound was swallowed by the strange light. It didn't echo. It just stopped, right at the edges of the car. As I drove past them, I dared myself to look directly. Their face was completely smooth, not featureless, but like their skin was pulled so tight that all the details, eyes, nose, mouth, were stretched flat into a blank, pale canvas. They didn't even have hair, just a smooth dome. And they didn't move a millimeter. They were watching the road itself, not me, like they were supervising the loop. I literally floored the gas pedal. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, which is a horrible thing to do at 90 miles per hour. But I had to reset. When I opened them, the intense orange light was gone. It was just normal twilight, hazy purple, but real. The smooth, endless road was gone. I was parked on the side of a proper 4-lane highway, 180. I was pulled over completely, engine off, keys still in the ignition. I checked my clock. It was 8:15 p.m. I had lost almost 3 hours. I had no memory of getting off the state route, no memory of driving 100 miles. I was shaking so hard I could barely open the door. I had to get out. I had to ground myself. I stumbled out onto the shoulder and leaned against the door. I looked down at my left knee, and right there, on the kneecap, was a bruise. Not a scraped bruise from a fall. It was perfectly circular,
about the size of a quarter, deep purple, like it had been stamped with something. It didn't hurt then,
but it ached for weeks afterward. I checked my jacket, my wallet, everything. Nothing was missing. I was 100 miles further down the road than I should have been 3 hours ago, and I had a stamp on my knee and 3 hours of pure existential gap in my life. I don't know who was standing by that fence, or why they made the road loop, or where my memory went. I just know that sometimes, when the light hits wrong, I feel that silence again, that absolute, stifling absence of sound. And I know that whatever I saw that night is still just out there, playing with the time codes on the side of the road, and I'm just trying not to drive into it again. Seriously, I think I need to turn the studio lights on full brightness after that. The idea of the smooth, featureless face supervising the break in physics, that's what sticks with you. If you've experienced something that fundamentally broke your sense of reality, we want to hear about it. Subscribe to Shadowen, and we'll be back soon.